Alright, day whatever. I'm not even sure where I'm at. Got the engine off of the stand. Got the rear main seal installed. My bolts. I gotta take these out. These are the ones I used to hold the crank when I torque the cam bolt. I bought this it's a little plastic doodad that goes right here. It's about yay long. It's got two rubber, I assume O-rings or something on them. And I've tried to watch a couple of videos on people getting these out, and it's quite a fight. They say it really helps with the oil pressure, and I know the Gen 4s haven't, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure on the 3s. I don't have any of them apart enough that I could tell. But I did buy one of those. I'd like to try to get it out of there, but I'm afraid if I drill a hole and put something in there to try to pull it out, that then I'm going to permanently mess it up and have to try to figure out how to drill it out. I really don't want to have to do everything twice, but as carboned up as everything was, I'm not sure I can get it out without a big fight. That's my concern. So I'm not really sure what to do except pretend I didn't see it, as Derek would say, and just move on. The oil pan's not on, and they make an alignment tool. There's plastic, and then there's like a aluminum one. I'm not saying that's not the way to do this, but if you don't have the oil pan off, like if you're trying to do this, like drop a transmission or replace the rear main seal, and all you're doing is pulling the cover, or whatever you're trying to do just to get this on, when you pull them two bolts out of the bottom of the oil pan that go into this, that changes the alignment on a lot of things, and so it probably isn't a bad idea to get that tool. In this case, I'm going to get everything on, get it all started with the bolts, turn it upside down. I'll line it up with the bottom of the face of where the oil pan bolts all the way across the block. I did that with the front one. I've done it on all of them. I've never had one leak by doing it that way, but everything has to be exactly lined up. You can't be off, up or down, or back and forth. If you try to do this with the pan on and you shove this on there, you have a possibility of not only damaging the rear main seal trying to shove it on there, but you also run the risk of getting it off one way or the other, and it may not leak right off the bat, but it's going to leak pretty soon if it's off one way or the other, up and down. That's the problem with these engines without the oil pan off. If anything, if you're going to do it inside, you might actually loosen the pan bolts if you can get to it. Drop it just a tad so that you can get it on there and get it lined up better. In this case, you're not really out that, because like I said, everything is off where you can actually see it, get to it, touch it, whatever. There is some grease in the rear main seal. I don't know about using assembly lube for this, but I definitely don't want it to dry out and burn up either. So I don't see a problem doing it that way. Got assembly lube everywhere from the cam pushing backwards out yesterday. They're fighting putting that on. What else is new? Wipe the cover back off. This rear main seal did the same thing the last one did. It almost pushed all the way in by hand. Kind of one of them. It's like, ooh. But as far as I know, they're still driving that 07 Tahoe. I did that original. That's first Gen 4 rebuild. Alright. Make sure your gasket's in place. There's no dowel pin, so it's kind of booger. What you want to do, that plastic piece comes already in the rear main seal, so you want to make sure that's in. Drop your drop your gasket. I put a bolt in to hold it, but that's not going to work very well either, I don't think. Hang on, I got all the bolts in my hand too, which aren't helping anything. Oh yeah, the bolts, it's rubbered in there, so it's actually holding it still. I forgot. Pick up the bolts. Keep the bolts down so I got both hands so I can do this right. Alright, so make sure it's lined up like it is. Try to get everything as lined up as possible, and then just slowly push it on, and then it pushes that plastic piece out. Do it as straight as possible, and it's on. It's pretty simple. Like I said, I know I've showed you before, but yep, and I'm just going to start the bolts now. I'm not going to tighten anything up till I put the engine, till I put it back on the stand. I mean, I can kind of feel if it's lined up with the block, so you can actually do it without having it upside down. But I just, like I said, just make sure it's flat at the bottom of both sides. You don't want that to be off. Because on a four-wheel drive, like this one is, if you've got a rear main seal leak, it's honestly easier to pull a motor than it is to pull the transfer case and transmission, in my opinion. It's that. Come on. I don't know where the two bolts are at. I gotta go find them. Anyway, I'm actually gonna leave it like this and put it back on the stand, and then I'll bring you back when I start trying. You're not going to be able to see anything, but I mean, I could snug it up, and I can feel where it looks, where it feels good at the bottom, just by actually a straight edge or a level of some type. When the engine's upside down, it's probably the better way to go, where you can actually, you know, make sure that it's touching on both sides. I noticed in the front the gasket's hanging down just a tad. I may actually loosen that up and push the gasket back up just a little bit, because the front seal actually is not touching anything yet. That actually doesn't come into play until you put your balancer on. So what I noticed is it's hanging down just a bit, just the gasket is, the pan's not. So I may loosen that back up and mess with that. But anyway, let me go find the other two bolts. I'll bring you back when it's all on, but that's basic how to install a rear main while the engine is out hanging on a stand, or in this particular case, cherry picker. Like I said, when it's in the vehicle, there's other videos out there of people actually putting it on while the engine is still in the engine compartment. They either pull the transmission. It's generally what they do. On a two-wheel drive, that would obviously be easier. On a four-wheel drive, in my opinion, it's easier to pull the engine, because chances are your rear main seal is not the only thing leaking. That your oil pan gasket could be leaking. This gasket could be leaking. That bypass that's on the side of the oil pan right above your oil filter, those are notorious for leaking. And half the time your valve covers are leaking also. So by pulling the engine out, you can kind of reseal, you know, most of the engine, including putting the front seal on if you needed to. And that way, you know, it's basically, matter of fact, that would be a perfect time to check and or replace the O-ring in your pickup tube on your oil pump, just to make sure that that's not an issue like it was in this particular case. So there's advantages to pulling the engine out. You don't have to take it clear apart. I mean, that's, unless you have a problem, you don't have to. But also, if you have a broken stud in the head, which is pretty common, a lot easier to get to when it's hanging here than it is trying to fight it inside the vehicle, especially if you don't have the right tools and stuff. So there's some advantages of pulling the engine. I mean, you're out a weekend or so. If you have help, it, you know, be better. But these aren't difficult to work on in the engine bay as some engines are, but they're so much easier when they're hanging here. So anyway, I'll bring you back here in a minute. I just want to bring you back really quick and tell you that I got the rear cover on, rear main seal, everything is lined up the way it's supposed to be. Everything is looking pretty good. So now brings a couple of things up real quick that I have not talked about in the past, and one is cleaning these surfaces. Now they may look kind of crappy in the camera, but they're pretty decent. I made sure that they're not. There's a little perma sticky on this, but it's nothing that the gasket doesn't ride there. But cleaning these surfaces, once you have seals installed, do not use a brake cleaner or anything like that, because that will dry out your oil grease that you have on there and possibly even shrink that seal up. That goes for any of those surfaces. When you're working on a car, when you use brake cleaner on it, if it gets on this, it's very possible to damage it. I ran into that on an old '89 Pontiac Bonneville. The AC, I'm trying to think of what was, something was leaking and I had cleaned it up. I don't remember what it was, and I sprayed brake cleaner in there to clean it up, and when I did, it got on the transmission seal coming out from the output shaft, or what you're going to call the CV, going the front axle, and then that thing started leaking. Of course, the vehicle's old. I'm not going to get into it too much, but if you have to wipe these off afterwards because it's dirty, you miss a spot or whatever, use a rag, put the brake cleaner on the rag, and then just wipe the surface off. All right, that's just public service announcement to stop any issues you may have. Now, I'm going to use this STP oil for break-in purposes. It's only going to run 10, 15, 20 minutes tops on that, and then I'm going to go back to the mobile. It's to help break in, seat the rings and stuff like that, just to kind of get everything started. And the reason I'm doing that is just because, there's a lot of people that say that the mobile is not the stuff to use for break-in purposes, the synthetic. So this is a non-synthetic standard. It doesn't have as much as that ZDP. I would like to use a diesel oil, but you got to be careful with certain diesel oils too, because like the Shell Rotella, which I've used a lot in the past on new engines, specifically air-cooled, straight 30 weight, is really high on detergent, and so that's not going to help in a lot of ways either. And you definitely don't want to put it in an old engine that's got a lot of miles on it, because that'll break a lot of that stuff free, then it could leak or smoke. And I ran into that. It could leak or smoke, but definitely smoke. Ran into that in an old Chevrolet 350. So you don't have to use garbage oil by any means, but I'm going to use the STP and a AC Delco filter, and then I've got the Mobil 1 filter and the Mobil 1 oil after the break-in period. Like I said, it's going to be a short one. All right, I don't have the balancer on there, and I don't have the lifters in, so I'm afraid when I pour this in here, it's going to end up just rolling partially on the floor. But I want to try to not really prime the pump. That's kind of what they call it, but basically what it's going to be doing is just making sure that everything is lubricated with oil before it cranks over, if that makes any sense. That's really all I'm doing. And so I bought quarts because it's 6 quarts. So if it starts running out on the floor, I'll stop pretty quick. But this should fill this tube all the way up. I know you can't really see what I'm doing. Nothing's making a mess yet. And there, it's clear full. Now it's running out the back. Of course it is. I don't want it to make it run off there instead. All right, but it didn't use very much, not as much as you think it did. That thing is level full. I know you can't see it. I'll take you over and take a look. It's level full. Now when I turn this pump over, it should start going away. Oh, I just slipped off. A lot of it's because it's moving around. The oil is gone, trust me. It's still not running out on the floor, but at least I know that it's got into there. I may go ahead and top that off, and then I'm going to put the oil pan on and turn it back over. The engine will not be turned back over again upside down for the rest of its time, because the next thing I'm going to do is put the lifters and stuff in. So, and probably put the front seal, or go ahead and put the balancer on. That way everything is sealed up, so I can fill it clear full of oil and not worry about stuff falling out of it. And you know what? I'm sorry. I'm not going to fill it up with oil. I gotta prime it. Sorry about that. But 1 quart going in here, or part of a quart, isn't going to hurt anything, because like I said, when I bring you back and show you the priming, priming it with the that little jug deal. It don't matter. I'll show you when we get to that point. But like I said, it's not really priming the pump. It's just filling it clear up with oil all the way around and sealing it up. Nothing's running on the floor, so I'm not sure where it went, but it's somewhere. So, but you don't want to pour the whole thing in there, because you really need. 5 quarts going in instead of 6 through your through your primer. Your pressure tank primer is not that big of a deal, but matter of fact, mine only holds 3 quarts, so I have to stop part of the way through, refill it, re-air it, and then put the rest of it in. So it's kind of a pain. That's why it'd be nice to have 3 quarts and 3 quarts. And you have to turn the engine over at the same time you're doing that. So anyway, I'll bring you back when we do that.